南无本师释迦牟尼佛。南无本师释迦牟尼佛。南无本师释迦牟尼佛。So we are explaining the 9 steps into the shamatha. And we have explained in this tradition the emphasis, and it is very important for understanding the whole of the Northern Buddhist tradition as it is practiced nowadays. In these 9 stages of shamatha, actually they do not directly mention the dhyanas, which are, according to the Abhidhamma, actually we have explained in the Abhidhamma, the right samadhi is explained as 8 kinds of samapati, which means 8 kinds of attainments of the dhyanas. The 4 dhyanas in the subtle forms and 4 dhyanas in the formless objects. Now we have the shamatha explained as 9 steps of shamatha, which lead to our capability to keep our mind in a state of perfect balance. Very important to understand. The Northern tradition actually emphasizes, we have already mentioned before, also on the base of Yogacara Bhumi Shastra, the unity of shamatha and vipassana. That is, we practice vipassana in shamatha, and we practice shamatha in vipassana. And the reason being is that the ultimate object is the mind. Finally, we practice the shamatha to be able to turn to the mind. And to be able to experience the mind without thinking. Apply the attention to the mind. And then direct the thinking in accordance with, that means direct the differentiation in accordance with the scriptures. This is the idea of the Sandhi Nirmochana Sutras. The object of vipassana is the Vinaya Sutras and the Abhidhamma or Abhidharma. And so the object of vipassana is also names, also the content of experience, the particular characteristics, special characteristics, the understanding of the time in which all the worldly objects operate. The time is impermanence. Understanding the wholesome and unwholesome in use of the objects, and finally understanding the suchness. And the suchness includes the suchness in the world and the suchness in ultimate sense. And we have explained in this tradition, the suchness in the ultimate sense is actually the mind itself. So when we have learned this art of samatha, then we apply it to the objects of our need, actually to realize the real nature of the mind. So with this understanding then, we emphasize the point that the main purpose of shamatha is to keep the mind in balance, in perfect balance. And to do it in all circumstances, in all kinds of conditioning, so as to be able to benefit oneself and benefit the beings to the maximum. And we have come to the sixth stage of the shamatha, or sixth abode in shamatha, and this abode really is the deeper experience of shamatha. Why? We have explained. Because in this abode there is no more gross tendency of mind to thinking and the gross tendency of mind to excitement. So the obstacles are revealed as soon as they arise. This is very important stage. So here we only talk about the subtle obstacles. So the mind becomes very appeased. That's why this stage is called the stage of appeasement. When we have experienced this stage, then actually what shamatha is becomes very clear. Why it becomes very clear? Because the power of awareness is ripening, and we have explained, in order that the power of awareness is ripening, first the power of mindfulness has had to ripen. Due to the power of mindfulness, even though we experience all kinds of sensations, all kinds of perceptions, all kinds of things are happening, we do not leave the meditation object. So we can enter the deeper stages of appeasement. Why? Because we have explained before, the mind, we can practice the stage called placing. Actually, this stage called placing explained the process of sublimating the mind. And in order to sublimate the mind, we need, if our object is an object we can grasp, the worldly object, and normally in the traditional Buddhism, even the early Mahayana masters like Kumarajiva and so on, they all explaining the meditation, they explain first the work on the worldly objects before turning to the ultimate. In the early Buddhism, we don't find any literature starting with the investigation of the ultimate. We don't find it. It comes later. First, we work on the penetration of the worldly reality. Then we contemplate the ultimate reality. This sequence is to a certain extent also kept in this tradition of Yogacara. The investigation of the worldly objects according to the Abhidharma, here the Northern Abhidharma, or the Northern Abhidharma of Northern Buddhism, connected with the path of Bodhisattva, actually is more or less all Yogacara. Yogacara explains the different forms of materiality, of different forms of the mental factors, the mind. And this explanation is very useful for the sake of realizing the suchness. So we have the worldly suchness. You will find the same idea in Theravada in a way, but not explained in the same way. Then we have the ultimate suchness. You will find also in the Agama the idea that the earth is a suchness, water is a suchness, the fire, wind, space is suchness. Now all these things, also in this tradition, the meditation on the breath is also the suchness. When you investigate the breath, you should know its names. That's why here we have the analysis of different names for the breath. You should know how we actually experience these names as the vibration, as movement. What is the particular characteristics of the wind and whatever object we may use? What is its common characteristic? How it appears in the three times, therefore it is a worldly suchness. Then how to use it correctly as a wholesome. That means when we use a breath, the aim of using the breath is to transcend the thinking, differentiating thinking, the vitarka. When you attain the perfectly balanced mind on the breath, the thinking will stop. Then you can apply it to the mind. The stopping of thinking is a very important experience. Here also, the Yogacara, in a way, is connected with the Indian tradition of yoga. Yoga is defined as the cessation of the activities of the mind. And for that we have also emphasized you can also use all kinds of skillful means like these vital energies which you experience in Qigong and so on. You use the subtle breath to bring the thinking to stop. This is a very important skillful means. And finally, the suchness or far aspect of Vipassana means that you actually realize that really by meditating on the breath, the thinking will stop. So you have realized the meditation on the breath, that it is really so. It brings you to the stopping of the applying the applying mind to objects. And for that, you need to work with a perfectly balanced mind. So, in the perfectly balanced mind, the shamatha and vipassana is then perfectly coordinated. And the vipassana, then you can penetrate all the teachings of the Buddha. It's also part of the vipassana. And in the Bodhisattva path, you can even apply this mind to the penetration of the worldly things, useful, like the medicine and so on. All this also, in a way, when you read the Bodhisattva Bhumi of the Yogacara Bhumi Shastra, it is also Vipassana. Because the Vipassana basically means wisdom, awareness. In the Pali Abhidhamma, it is also explained as a synonym of the Panya, Pore, the synonym of Sampajanya, the awareness. So, in order to understand things as they are in the world, and beyond the world, you need the mind in perfect balance. And to have the mind in the perfect balance, then you have to develop these powers. The first we have explained is a power of hearing. You hear from the teacher about the appeasement, about the inconvenience of the monkey mind, about the inconvenience of the gross mind, about the bliss of the subtle mind. The more subtle the mind, the more blissful it becomes. And you hear that only the mind in perfect balance can see things as they are. You contemplate these things, so you develop faith, you develop desire, enthusiasm, and you practice. Despite the fact of facing obstacles, you continue your practice. Therefore, you see, as we have explained, that by forceful attention you cannot get anywhere. So you practice mindfulness. This is not only in meditation, this is also for daily life, for changing our habits. Meditation is to change our habits. It is not only to attain a nirvana. In this tradition, of course, it is emphasized that there is ultimately one reality, which is called suchness, emptiness. It contains all realities. There is a suchness in the world, and there is a suchness in the ultimate sense. So practicing the Bodhisattva path means contemplating this one reality. Of course, you can even find all has basis in the Agamas. In the Agamas, the Buddha also teaches Ekam hi Sacham, only one truth is there. But it is interpreted in a different way. So all these teachings actually have the very firm base in the Agamas. So when we have the power of hearing, power of contemplation, we develop the power of mindfulness. When we have the power of mindfulness, we develop the power of awareness. When we develop the power of awareness, we develop the power of equal effort. This is very important to understand. In order to bring the mind into the state of perfect balance, we have to develop the power of equal effort, so that the forceful attention simply does not happen anymore. This is the stage of real ripening of wisdom. And the ripening of wisdom is connected with both the shamatha and vipassana. When the forceful attention does not happen anymore, you are a real master of meditation. It means you can learn to work with mindfulness most of the time. Because you work with mindfulness most of the time, the defilements stop to be so troublesome. They appear but do not stay. This is where the power of awareness starts ripening. When the power of awareness starts ripening, then the defilements come and go without disturbing much. And one who practices the path of Bodhisattva, he is to practice this conditioning all the time. The idea of the path of Bodhisattva is to stay in samsara, to benefit all beings, But due to this mastery of shamatha, due to the mastery of the perfectly balanced mind, do so without suffering, or with minimum suffering. This is the ultimate freedom. And this freedom is gained by purifying the mind, as we have started in the beginning, by wisdom. What wisdom here? The wisdom of suchness. The wisdom of the nature of the mind. The ultimate object of investigation is the suchness of the mind. So now we have reached the 6th stage, so we have the understanding of the importance of equal effort. So after the power of awareness comes the power of equal effort. And here we have again the technical terms which I believe maybe come from the yoga tradition again. It's abhoga and anabhoga. Very wonderful word, very difficult to translate. The Xuanzang translate as yungkung puyungkung, which is okay, but maybe not an ideal translation. We have already mentioned there is a Pali word, abhujita, very important in Abhidhamma. When you study Pali Abhidhamma, the commentary says that according to abhujita, there is either wholesome or unwholesome mind. Abhujita actually means how you enjoy the object, how you relate to the object. Bhuj means to bend. Sanskrit is very interesting language. From the roots you can get all kinds of nuances. Every word has a root, and you can get through these roots all kinds of nuances to explain the technical terms you are using. And this is a habit of the teachers, no matter whether Pali tradition, Sanskrit tradition, to relate to these roots, to explain the nuances of the meanings, which are practically not possible to translate in other language. So that's why the study of Pali and Sanskrit is very, very useful. You cannot get also these nuances in English, impossible. So the bhuj means to bend, the bhuj means also to enjoy, bhoga, and so on, many, many nuances. And abhoga means relating to the object. And when you connect it with anabhoga, it means relating to the object with too much energy, or relating to the object with too little energy. And in order to see this, you need a very, very subtle mind, the mind which is free from all gross tendencies to thinking and to excitement. So that mind can discover immediately as it appears the tendency of the mind to grasping, the tendency of the mind to resistance, tendency of the mind to excitement, tendency of the mind to thinking, or tendency of the mind to doubt what one is engaged in. So the mind is very appeased. This very appeased mind is really a wonderful experience. So in this sixth stage of shamatha, when one has attained it, one can feel very confident, and one can sit for a long time, tolerate the inconveniences of the body, which will always be there, even in case of great meditators. But we can only tolerate them when our mind attains such a state of peace. So we can see how distant we are from this ideal of a perfectly balanced mind, because we can discover these tendencies of excitement and of thinking as soon as they appear. When one gets into this condition, it is not difficult to learn the dhyana. If one works with the breath, then the shamatha, nimitta of the breath will appear. If one works with other meditation object, then the shamatha nimitta can appear. And the shamatha nimitta is the condition for leaving the sphere of perception based on the five senses and entering the sphere of perception based on the subtle forms. These subtle forms you first have to create in the mind. Only then you can enter that sphere. So also this is related to the understanding that how the objects appear depends on the mind. You can see it in your meditation very clearly when you make some progress. Depending how you make the breath in the mind, you will experience it either as gross or as subtle or as very, very subtle, or you will not experience it at all as the gross breath will disappear. What you will experience is only the mental image based on that object. No more breath. But the object is the same. Only the mind has changed. And this is happening all the time, only we are not aware of it. How we experience the object actually depends how we make the object in the mind. So here we have experience of a very subtle mind. And this experience of the very subtle mind is very, very important. Unless we have it, very difficult to get deeper into vipassana, impossible. And because the gross tendency of the mind to think and to excitement has disappeared, then one, as we have explained, one sees clearly the aim to bring the mind into perfect balance. One has to learn to use the power of equal effort. So it is explained as neither abhoga nor anabhoga. So neither too much application nor too little application. Not too much force in bending to the object, not too little force in bending to the object, so that even the subtle tendencies of the mind to thinking and to excitement may disappear. When one sees this clearly, one can enter the seventh stage of shamatha, which is called vyupashama. Vyupashamati means appeasing very much. Appeasing very much means when one works on the equal effort. So the mind flows without bumps, so to say, without ups and downs. In this case, one can attain the one-pointedness of the mind. In the state of one-pointedness of the mind, the attention has no more bumps up and down, and there is equal effort in application to the object. So this is to be trained. When one trains in this, to make this one-pointedness of mind spontaneous, one can dwell in a state of samadhi for a long, long time. So one can attain the highest stage of appeasement, and that is samadhi, the perfect balance of the mind, by the habit of practicing the one-pointedness of the mind. What is the conditioning of a Buddha? He is always dwelling, whatever the object there may be, he is always dwelling in this conditioning, always in the perfect balance of the mind. So he is not influenced. He explained the law. He is not influenced by what those who listen to the law are experiencing. He is not influenced by any phenomena. So he becomes law himself. So everything he does becomes a perfect. So he is using, as the Agamas explain, he is using the conventions of the world completely free from clinging to them. So he has no obstacle in the world, The world may have obstacle with him, but he has no obstacle in the world. Because he is just pointing to the law. And in order to do it, he has to keep the mind in perfect balance in all conditioning. So this is the perfection to be attained. So even when we find this explanation of the shamatha in the passage referring to the training of the arahat, this idea still remains in the background to attain the perfection of the mind in application to the object. With this type of power of samadhi, one can go over all obstacles. With a mind in perfect balance. And this is the highest perfection the being can attain. So through the power of cultivating the equal effort, we attain the power of samadhi. So the result will be that the attention is always spontaneous. This kind of spontaneous attention actually is also can be explained as no attention. The mind becomes like a mirror. So one does not need anymore to investigate the object. One does not need anymore to bring the object to the mind. One just reflects it as it is. So in this explanation of shamatha, rather than talking about the dhyana, it talks about the perfection in keeping the mind in perfect balance. And for that, you need to practice these 9 steps. When you become familiar with the higher steps, the lower steps do not occur. Especially not the forceful application, forceful attention. Then no more losing mindfulness. Then finally no more losing awareness. And finally no more losing the equal effort. And finally always be in samadhi. The Buddha, no matter whether the Shravaka Buddha, the disciple Buddha, or the perfectly enlightened Buddha, what is their conditioning? They are always in samadhi. Therefore, so to say, they are beyond the mental suffering. And the Buddhism teaches the mental suffering is not necessary. And once we are born, the physical suffering cannot be avoided. Whatever is born is to die. But the mental suffering can be avoided. And the best way to avoid it is to cultivate this perfect balance of the mind. And if we want to practice the non-dualistic path, stay in samsara, and while not experiencing the suffering. So this is a training, and this training may take many lives. It is not easy. So it's not just going into the state of dhyana, but it is to keep the mind in perfect balance all the time. Not to say avoiding the challenges, but face them with the mind in perfect balance. This is the ideal of the Bodhisattva path. That's why the shamatha is explained in this way. So this training is also connected with 4 types, with many aspects. Since we have mentioned the forceful attention, then you have the attention with gaps. We have already mentioned the gaps in what? Gaps in clarity, because the mind still has tendencies of thinking and of excitement. So there are gaps in clarity which become less and less significant as we go to the higher stages. Then the application or attention without gap, when you attain the one-pointedness of the mind. And finally the samadhi, the spontaneous application in perfect balance. So we have the 6 powers to be cultivated through learning meditation. We have these 4 attentions. Then we have the 5 thoughts to be removed by shamatha. We have mentioned the laziness. Unless we remove laziness, we cannot develop awareness. So when awareness is there, the laziness is gone. When awareness is not there, laziness. When the awareness is there, we will be aware of the thought of thinking and the thought of excitement. And we have explained the excitement also means attachment, also means resistance, also means remorse and worry. Actually, it also implies even fear, depression. All these states are the states of excitement. And basically the excitement is based on what? On grasping. The habit of grasping. This habit is very, very deep. The more one meditates, the more one will be aware how deep this habit of grasping is. So one will put more effort into staying in the higher stages of shamatha. We have explained Abhidhamma explained the grasping like the piece of raw flesh on the hot iron. It is a very, very unpleasant feeling. Of course, where there is a resistance, there is no grasping, but the resistance is based on grasping. So the grasping and resistance, they are like two sides of the same coin, which is called ignorance. So all these different manifestations of excitement, and excitement, when it passes, it tends to bring mind to the thinking. Very important to understand. This is the non-balance of the mind. So when the mind has no excitement, no thinking, the worldly mind becomes bored. The Abhidhamma, the study of Pali Abhidhamma is very, very rewarding. Explains in a very wonderful way. The Buddha explained that the neutral sensation is pleasant for the wise and unpleasant for the non-wise. And there is a explanation in the commentaries. We beings, we are all chasing after sensations. Due to sensations, we create the karma. Why we create the karma? Because we grasp the sensations. So, we not being the Buddhas, we are always bound in a subtle way or in a more gross way to chase after sensations. And it is compared to a hunter chasing after the deer. The hunter has hurt the deer with his arrow, and he's chasing after him and wants to catch him. So he follows his steps and he follows the blood. It's very wonderful simile. Actually, this grasping is like suffering. Then he comes to the rock. On the rock he cannot see the steps of the deer. No more steps. So what does he do? He runs around the rock, however big it may be, to find again the continuation of the steps of the wounded deer. So we beings, we are also like that. When there is no pleasant or unpleasant sensation, we are desperately searching the traces of some sensation to continue. So that much now, and we have covered this 9 stages of shamatha. We may come to it again. And now let us go to the questions. I can sit long, 1 hour, but without a clean object and without a clear object. Is it useful to meditation, or it's not encouraged to stay like this? Actually, in the northern tradition, like in Tibetan tradition, when they learn the shamatha, and I have some experiences of teaching shamatha in this Tibetan background, they learn shamatha, they sit for a very short time, relatively short time. Now we are sitting for a long time, and it is very useful also. According to the Abhidhamma, the truth of suffering is hidden from us because we change the bodily postures. Iriyapatha. Try to sit 1 hour without changing the bodily posture. You will see very clearly this body is very troublesome. When you know this body is very troublesome, it is very easy to detach. Because we don't see this body is very troublesome, we find it very difficult to detach. So there is one system teaching shamatha on short sessions with a very, very sharp, concentrated mind, and another way is to endure. If we learn to endure, also the shamatha should become very easy, because there is no shamatha without letting go. So according to the all Buddhist traditions, and it is very important to understand, all states of wholesome mind are connected with upeksha. Not upeksha means non-partiality of the mind. We have, in Buddhism, we distinguish 2 kinds of upeksha, 2 kinds of here upeksha, if we translate it as a neutral feeling, it is not the apply here, so just keep the word upeksha. Upeksha also very interesting word, very, that's why it is quite useful to study Sanskrit, study Pali. Upeksha means is from the Sanskrit to iksha, to see, and upa means near, and upa means also no, deprivative. So seeing from near and not seeing. Very wonderful. That means to let go. Non-partiality. What means non-partiality? neither clinging to the pleasant nor forcefully rejecting the unpleasant. This is impartiality. This is upeksha. So we have two upeksha. The upeksha means also neutral feeling, neither pleasant nor unpleasant feeling. And upeksha also means the impartiality of the mind. The mind neither clings to the pleasant sensation nor rejects the unpleasant sensation. That is called samskara upeksha. The equanimity. You can best maybe translate it by this Latin word equanimity. To be equanimous to the pleasant and unpleasant sensation, to be impartial to them. That is seeing or experiencing but not seeing. Very wonderful. And according to the Buddhist psychology, all wholesome states of mind or developed wholesome states of mind, they have this quality of the equanimity toward sensations. We have explained what the cause of karma is holding to sensation. What we hold to are actually sensations. Due to sensations, we make wholesome or unwholesome acts. According to Buddhism, when we make wholesome acts, we will experience sometime, we don't know when, a pleasant sensation. When we do unwholesome acts, we will experience the unpleasant sensation. When very unwholesome acts, then very unpleasant sensation in the hells or as hungry ghost. When a very pleasant sensation and we attach to them, then we may experience the heaven, but all this is still in impermanence. And even now in our daily life, according to Buddhist teaching, when we experience the pleasant sensation, it must have been a result of some karma, wholesome, when unpleasant sensation, some unwholesome karma. But yet it does not mean that everything is karma. So sitting long has a meaning, but while sitting long, we should still not exaggerate. That means if we feel very uncomfortable, we can change the posture, no problem, or we can stand and meditate in standing. So the result will be that we can keep the mindfulness. And in the beginning, of course, it is for beginners in meditation, it is very common that the object of meditation will not be clear. But we make it eventually clear by practicing. And we should contemplate and see very clearly that the real shamatha and real vipassana cannot be with a non-clear object. So we have to make effort to make the meditation object clear. It is a challenge of meditation. And we have to use all kinds of skillful means to do so. If the task is to find our awareness, then what is that which is concentrating? That which is concentrating is the concentration itself. What is the problem? There is a mental factor called concentration, and there is a mental factor called wisdom. One can be aware of concentration, so what is concentrating? One can be aware of concentration, so what is... I don't quite understand, I'm sorry. The concentration is the one-pointedness of the mind. When you are aware, so you can be also aware of the presence of the one-pointedness of mind. This is what is shamatha about. Shamatha is based on the training in one-pointedness of the mind. We have explained that. According to Yogacara Bhumi Shastra, the one-pointedness of the mind is the base, and the reward is happiness. In shamatha we experience happiness. In all stages of shamatha which are little higher, we experience the happiness. Actually, even when we go to the fourth dhyana, we experience the happiness. But how to call it? The happiness of upeksha, happiness of equanimity. This happiness is most subtle. So when we learn the shamatha, the traditional ways, through experiencing the dhyanas, we are experiencing first the happiness of the first and second dhyana with joy and happiness, the happiness of the third dhyana which is without joy, and the happiness of the fourth dhyana which is with upeksha. This is the explanation of the Yogacara Bhumi Shastra, and it is in a way much clearer, because when we think that in the fourth dhyana happiness goes away, the purpose of shamatha is happiness, so it does not make much sense. So this Yogacara explanation is in a way better, because we practice shamatha to experience happiness. Then when the mind is happy, it can accept suffering. If the mind is not happy, how will it accept suffering? So we have explained the learning meditation is learning the non-partiality of the mind in happiness and suffering. If you can do it, you become the master of meditation. How do you properly get down from first jhana? When I get in, I have trouble getting out and staying out. So there are actually different ways of practicing the dhyana, and different teachers teach the dhyana in a different way. If you learn according to the tradition, as explained in the Visuddhimagga, as explained in the Southern Buddhism, so you can't miss the you cannot be in trouble of getting out of first dhyana, because practicing the dhyana is connected with the 5 masteries. When you have these 5 masteries, you actually have the mastery of the first dhyana. Otherwise, you may have first dhyana or may not, but you cannot be sure unless you have these 5 masteries. And what are the 5 masteries? Whenever you turn to the object of the dhyana, you turn immediately. As soon as you turn to this object, you can enter into the dhyana. When you enter into the dhyana, you decide how long you will stay in this conditioning. Then, having passed the time, you go out of the dhyana and you investigate the causes of the dhyana. The causes of the dhyana, first dhyana, are 5. The applied thought or sustained thought, joy, happiness, and one-pointedness of the mind. And you can actually experience them very, very clearly by paying attention to the object of dhyana in the base of your mind. Then you will discover the mind going to that object, and in that mind you can distinguish these very clearly, these 5 mental factors, because they control the attitude of the mind, the abhujita, as we have said. Then you can be absolutely sure you have attained the first dhyana and you have mastered the first dhyana, and you can use it for vipassana. This is the advantage of the way it is explained in the Visuddhimagga. Now, not all the teachers teach the dhyana as it is explained in the Visuddhimagga, but when you learn this way, it is very scientific and very advantageous. So why not learn in this way? Then this problem cannot appear. Bhante, could you please explain how to be mindful when we are studying or working? Well, we have explained we have to understand what is mindfulness about. Then to know if we are mindful or not, we have to know what is being non-mindful. When we see very clearly the troublesome nature of non-mindfulness, then the mindfulness step by step becomes natural. When we don't see the troublesome nature of not being mindful, in the Buddhist tradition, not being mindful is called negligence, pramada. When we are not mindful, actually we are negligent. We are lazy. Kausidyam. Kausidyam, we have said in the shamatha, the first enemy is laziness. And the laziness also you can explain as the fan-i, the negligence. The Buddha says in the Dhammapada that the negligence is a way to death and the non-negligence is a way to immortality. And non-negligence is mindfulness. So in order to know if we are mindful or not, we have to know what is being non-mindful. It is being negligent, it is being lazy. When we are lazy, when we are not mindful, what will happen? We pay attention to one object and we at the same time our mind runs to another object. So this is not being mindful. We forget the object of our attention. So this is how the monkey mind arises. Because we pay attention to one object and our mind is occupied at the same time with another object. Being mindful does not mean that the mind is not aware of other objects. On the contrary, it is aware of all different objects, but it is not disturbed by them. Why? Because it always recollects the mind to mind the object of the attention. So the mindfulness does not mean that the mind is one-pointed on one object and forgetting all the other objects, like in dhyana, but it means the mind is open and concentrated. According to the Abhidhamma, all the states of wholesome mind are connected with this ability of mindfulness. Because of mindfulness, we can distinguish what is wholesome, what is unwholesome, what is beneficial, what is non-beneficial, what is skillful, what is not skillful, what object is suitable for concentration, what object is not suitable for concentration. And we can understand, as we have learned, that all objects are the five aggregates, and the five aggregates are the process of impermanence. All this we can clearly know by mindfulness. So here the mindfulness leads to awareness, which purifies the mind. So when we are mindful, how do we know we are mindful? Our mind is stable. When we are not mindful, our mind is unstable and become the monkey mind. So that much for the questions now. We will go to the other questions in the evening.